Good evening, friends. This is always my pleasure to welcome you all to this lecture. In fact, this lecture has been organized for graduate students. Interestingly, this lecture has been organized by Dr. Kumar, Assistant Professor, Department of History, for his graduate students. And the topic for today's lecture is from notebook to textbook: history, society, and historians. And அனைவருக்கும் என்னுடைய மாலை வணக்கத்தை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். இந்த உரையானது யூஜி ஸ்டூடெண்ட்ஸ் மற்றும் ஆராய்ச்சி மாணவர்களுக்காக டாக்டர் குமார் இதை பிரயாசப்பட்டு அரேஞ்ச் செய்துள்ளார். அவருக்காக என் நன்றி கலந்த வணக்கத்தை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். So the topic today is very, very interesting. Before I go into the details of my lecture, I always try to show a picture. Now lecture normally students teach பண்றதுக்கு முன்னாடி, particularly UG students, history அப்படின்னா என்ன, நமக்கும் சமுதாயத்திற்கும் உள்ள உறவு எந்த வகையான உறவு, வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர்களாகிய நமக்கும் வரலாற்று மாணவர்களாகிய நமக்கும் சமுதாயத்துக்கும் எந்த மாதிரியான உறவு இருக்கின்றது. இதை பல்வேறு ஆராய்ச்சியாளர்கள் மிக தெளிவாக எடுத்துரைத்திருக்கின்றார்கள் அவர்களுடைய வரலாற்று புத்தகங்களிலே. So many scholars who have attempted to say and discuss what exactly history is all about. Why do we need to study history? What is the relationship between history and society? Whether historians play constructive role in the society, or historians are trying to create kind of controversies in the society, or whether historians are trying to create an inclusive society, or whether historians are trying to create a communally divided society. So there are multiple stories we need to remember. So I try to show you a picture which you will be able to understand why there is a need to study history. Why there is a need to study history. So sometimes the moment we see or moment we think about history, some of the people will think it's terribly boring subject. History may be a terribly boring subject for some of the students. Some students might say history is really filled with facts and figures. So you are supposed to memorize a lot of things. Let us try to explore whether history is necessarily filled with facts and figures, or historians have a tremendously rich responsibility in the society, in shaping the society. I'll just show you a picture because I just want to make it very formal today, not very informal way of sharing my ideas. Just see the picture. I hope you are able to see. Yeah? You might interpret this picture in different ways. Maybe you can comment and you can give your own caption. That will be very interesting. So what do you think about the picture? What comes to your mind when you see this picture? Okay, as a student of history, I do understand there is something spectacular in this picture. A very important scholar, an African national movement leader, some of us might have read, Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey. So he was one of the leading African national movement leader. He said once very clearly, people without the knowledge of their history and culture are like trees without roots. Right? People without the knowledge of their history and culture are like trees without roots. This is the picture I just showed you. This is a tree which doesn't have any roots. So now the question is, are we really trying to be like a tree without roots, or you want to be a tree with roots? That's a clear connection between the argument made by Marcus Garvey and the picture that you see. So those of you who see today this lecture, I think my humble request is to have a passion for history. If you don't have a passion for history, if you don't want to understand about your culture, if you don't want to know about your heritage, we will remain like a tree with no roots. We will remain like a tree with no roots. Okay, this is one thing. Now this helps us to understand what is history. வரலாறு என்றால் என்ன? So first we have seen that people who have no knowledge about their history are like trees without roots. And secondly, this helps us to understand what exactly history is all about. வரலாறு என்றால் என்ன? So we must have read a lot of explanations in our school days. History is nothing but record of the past. வரலாறு என்பது பழைய காலத்தில் எழுதப்பட்ட ரெக்கார்டை பற்றி படிப்பது, அல்ல பழைய கால மனிதர்களை பற்றி படிப்பது, பழைய கால மக்களின் வாழ்க்கையை பற்றி படிப்பது. அது வந்து ஒரு conventional way of argument. Conventional way. So in just 30 or 40 years ago, we were under the impression that history is nothing but record of the past. But now we need to understand through different perspectives. History is not necessarily a record of the past. So what else? வரலாறு என்பது பழைய காலத்தை மட்டுமே படிப்பது அல்ல. For example, I want to quote two important historians here. One is E.H. Carr. What is history? E.H. Carr என்ற ஆங்கில வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர் வரலாறு என்றால் என்ன என்பதை ஒரு மிகவும் தெளிவாக விளக்கியுள்ளார். 1962. This book was published in 1962. And the second important scholar, R.G. Collingwood. He has written a book called The Idea of History. R.G. Collingwood has written a book called The Idea of History. So this book was published in 1946. So these two scholars defined history very clearly now, more than ever before. So those of you who study history for the first time, since this lecture is especially for undergraduate students, I have to be very, very slow, steady, and I have to go down to the level of the students. I don't want to make it a very complex presentation today. So what is history? History is a continuous process of interaction between past and present. History is a continuous process of interaction between past and present. There is no end to history. There is no end to history. So there may have been historical records about Mahatma Gandhi, or about Indus Valley civilization, or about Ambedkar, or about international movement. So whatever they have written is not the end of the story. Right? So history, therefore, is a continuous process of interaction between past and present. So therefore, we use the symbols of past to refer to the present. Therefore, we continuously use the names of the people who lived in the past to justify the present. Therefore, we continuously use the ideological aspects of the ancient, medieval, and early modern India to validate the present politics or the present society. So it is in this context we need to remember one thing: history is no longer merely a record of the past. It is a continuous process of interaction between past and present. This is one explanation. And second explanation was given by E.H. Carr, said, history is an unending dialogue between historians and their facts. Suppose I am a student of history. I might be called as a historian as well by students. So it is in this context, this is an unending dialogue between me as a student, or as a scholar, or as a teacher, or as a historian, and my sources. Right? So history is not just a dialogue. What does dialogue mean? Dialogue has everything, beginning, and it also has an end. So the dialogue that we are talking about, history, is an unending one. So there is no end for history. There is no end for this particular dialogue. So what I write might be different from another scholar. What that scholar writes may be different from the third person, and therefore history is continuously different from one person to another. So I might use a different source. So somebody else might use another kind of source. So that doesn't mean that what Kristudas says is final, or what Bipan Chandra says is final, or what Romila Thapar says is final. So Romila Thapar herself said, I write what I feel is right, what I think is right. So every individual therefore has a right to write history. It is not meant for those elite sections. It's not meant for the upper class sections. It's not meant for the mainstream people. So everyone therefore is expected to know about their history. Everyone is expected to know about the history of their society, and therefore history is a common property. And the definitions which I want to suggest here in this lecture is, history is a continuous process of interaction between past and present. There is no end to history. And secondly, history is an unending dialogue between historians and their sources. Number two. And it is in this context we need to remember what kind of historians that you want to make. Who is a historian? Now we understand. வரலாறு என்றால் என்ன என்பதை பற்றி நாம் தெளிவாக அறிந்து கொண்டோம். So who is a historian? Who is a historian? Simply I'll give you a formula. ASK. Ask. Just definition. ASK. So each letter stands for a particular sentence or word. So historians are those who ask questions. First A stands for ask. Historians are those who ask questions. It's not something that we are simply imitating what is already existing in the library. It's not something that we see something in the archives and we are simply reproducing. It is not something that we simply believe the WhatsApp messages as the final, because we are living in the time where everything can be read through WhatsApp. And most of the time, WhatsApp message leads to a lot of controversies. WhatsApp messages about history leads to a lot of conflicts and violence sometimes. So therefore, as historian, as student of history, the first thing we need to do is we have to ask questions. So every student of history, those who have passion for history, must ask questions. And secondly, who is a historian? Historians are those who look for sources. Historians are those who seek for sources. Okay, so it's always important. ஆதாரங்களை தேடுவதிலே வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர்களுக்கு ரொம்ப முக்கியத்துவம் இருக்கிறது. கேள்வி கேட்பதிலும் ஆதாரங்களை எப்படியாவது எங்கிருந்தாவது நாம் தேடுவதில் இருக்கிற ஒரு ஆவல், அதுவே ஒரு வரலாற்று ஆசிரியருக்காக மிகுந்த ஆனது. So historians are those who seek for sources. And third important reason, who is a historian, is historians are those who knock the doors of libraries and archives. It is very, very important. Normally, anyone who has a passion for history will be the first one to go to library and archives. That's very, very, I think I'm talking from various people's experience as well. So, who is a historian? Therefore, we need to remember historians are those who ask questions. Secondly, historians are those who seek for sources. And thirdly, historians are those who knock the doors of libraries and archives. And why I'm using this is very simple, because at the end of the day, we need to remember historians are those who provide knowledge to the society. Knowledge to the society. So, வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர்களுடைய கடமை இங்கே மிகவும் முக்கியமானதாக நம்ம பார்க்கிறோம். So this clearly tells us that historians should therefore take these things very, very seriously. So I'm not saying historians are not doing, but this is since it's meant for undergraduate students. So I'm emphasizing, because the title itself tells us from notebook to textbook. So I'm talking from 30 years ago or 20 years ago. So we were taught normally from one single notebook. One teacher would come, or one a lecturer would come to the class, and he would carry the same note which he used in his studies, right? And in this note, the teacher used to dictate simply what we are supposed to learn. So that was the culture 20, 30 years ago. So now I think the situation is changing. So now students are supposed to read textbook. So what I'm trying to suggest here is there is a change. There is a transition from the notebook culture to the textbook culture. So in the notebook culture, very few historians would ask these questions. In the notebook culture, very few historians try to give new information. But now we are living in the era of textbook culture. We are living in the era of archival culture. We are living in an era of library culture. I think every student of history or those who have passion for history is supposed to ask questions, are supposed to seek for new sources, new information, and thirdly, look for important aspects from different historical settings. So now this is very, very important. It is in this context I need to tell you how the historical consciousness started coming up. வரலாற்று உணர்வு எப்படி இந்தியர்கள் மத்தியிலே ஒரு பரவலாக it started spreading. எப்படி பரவியது? So how the historical consciousness started emerging among the people of India particularly. So first thing that we need to remember, it was Herodotus who was considered to be the father of history. The German scholar was considered to be the father of history because for the first time there is a historical work started emerging. முதல் முறையாக ஹெரோடோட்டஸ் என்பவரால் தான் இந்த வரலாறு என்பது ஒரு சப்ஜெக்டாக உருவெடுத்தது வந்தது என்பது ஆதாரபூர்வமாக நிரூபிக்கப்பட்டிருக்கிறது. So there are many scholars who have worked on this, and in India, most importantly, of course, there were rudimentary forms of historical consciousness in ancient India. Rudimentary forms of consciousness in ancient India. For example, you understand that how there was historical consciousness in ancient India. Who was the first historian in ancient India possibly? So till 12th century, we hardly come across any major historical work about India. But in the 12th century, there was a person called Kalhana. Kalhana was the first historian of Kashmir who produced, in fact, the first historical work entitled the Raja Tarangini. So this possibly be one of the first important work of an Indian. So this could possibly be considered as one of the most important historical works in the early medieval period, 12th century. And it's very interesting that J.L. Mehta, historian who has worked extensively on medieval India, most importantly, made reference to the work of Kalhana. For example, let me quote one important work of J.L. Mehta. In this work, he argues, particularly the advanced study in the history of medieval India. In the history of medieval India, historian J.L. Mehta argues that it was Kalhana Pandit was the pioneer historiographer in the early medieval India. So this Raja Tarangini, we all know, was written in the 12th century, originally written in Sanskrit, and later it was translated in English in 1900 by European scholar Stein. So this is the historical consciousness that we are talking about in the early period of India. And coming to the medieval period, and there were of course a kind of consciousness about history writing. And most importantly, this was a conventional way of writing. You might have seen works by Aine Abul Fazl's Aine Akbari, and then Akbar Nama. Most importantly, these were the works as biographies and chronicles. So again, this may not be considered as purely as a historical work. So again, the point which I am trying to discuss is in the medieval period. In the medieval period, there was hardly any consciousness of history writing. But in the modern period, we understand the historiography, the idea of historiography started coming up in the modern period. Most importantly by the British. It was the British who wanted to study Indian society, Indian culture, and Indian customs, beliefs, practices for their vested interests. Right? So for the first time, you remember, for the first time we read from history that James Mill was one of the first historians or first British writers who started writing history about India. And most importantly, the title of his book identified predominantly for its criticism about Indian civilization, about Indian culture. This study created a series of controversies, series of conflicts and confrontations. For example, James Mill, in his book History of British India, started criticizing the Indian culture and the religions of India from the Western perspective. So remember, always history was written in the modern period from the Western perspective, from the European perspective, from the civilized perspective. The people, they consider that they are more civilized, whereas they considered India as a barbaric country. So this is again a controversial beginning. So for the first time, there are many scholars who have already pointed out, it was James Mill என்கிற பிரிட்டிஷ் எழுத்தாளர் இந்தியாவை முதலாக இந்து இந்தியா, முஸ்லிம் இந்தியா, பிரிட்டிஷ் இந்தியா என்று 3 வகையாக பிரித்திருக்கிறார். So in his book we clearly understand that it was James Mill for the first time attempts to divide the Indian society into 3 segments. One is ancient India, now what we understand was perceived by him as Hindu India. And secondly, what we understand today as a medieval period was perceived by him as a Muslim period. And third, importantly, what we understand today as a modern period was also seen by James Mill as British period. So the problem therefore begins from the historiography of the British. So the problem therefore begins from the historiography of the British. So it is in this context there are a number of studies started emerging. It is in this context controversial studies, religion-based studies, language-based studies, and most importantly, the colonial agencies also started writing, particularly missionaries, and they also started relying on this particular work. So, most importantly, James Mill never visited India. He knew none of the Indian languages, but his objective was to collect, read, evaluate the written records. So ஜேம்ஸ் மில் என்பவர் இந்தியாவுக்கு வந்ததாக நமக்கு இதுவரை தகவல் இல்லை. இந்திய மொழிகளை பற்றி அவருக்கு எந்தவித அறிவும் இருந்ததாக நமக்கு தகவல் இல்லை. So how did he write history about India? He did not visit India. He knew nothing about Indian languages. How was it possible to write 3 huge volumes about Indian history? So scholars argue, including Romila Thapar and others, that he relied a large amount of information from British repositories in different languages. So it was James Mill, even though he never visited, he knew none of the Indian languages, he was able to produce huge 3 volumes about India because he was able to get information from various repositories in Europe in different languages about India. So this is the reason why even there are many criticism about this important work. Romila Thapar and other historians argue that the attitude of the British was that they don't have to know anything about India. They don't have to know the language. They don't have to know the culture of Indian people, but still they were able to write history about Indian people. So that's really a controversial thing that we need to know. So what I'm trying to suggest is the notion of historiography, the idea of historiography in modern India, therefore, began with a critical and controversial note. It was the British for the first time started dividing the Indian society based on religions, like Hindu India, Muslim India, and British India. So they always try to look from the European perspective. He felt particularly that Europe was in the highest state of civilization. So therefore, non-European countries were seen as barbarians. So non-European people therefore became a curious subject of critical scrutiny. That's the point that which I am trying to say. So the point which we need to understand in this lecture is the historical consciousness. The historical consciousness that we have today, even though can be traced back to the modern period, but the critical interpretation started from European scholars, most importantly James Mill and others. So I don't want to go into the details of his 6 volumes. Basically it was divided into 3 books, but you have 6 major books, and here he was making a scathing attack on Hindu customs, saying that it was backward culture, and he was always advocating that the British should be here in India. Only the British would be able to provide good governance. It was only the British would be able to provide impartial laws. And it was only the British who would be able to provide a system of governance. So it is always in this context, this particular historical work became a textbook for almost all the Europeans, particularly the civil servants. The civil servants also were taught this book as a kind of textbook. Remember, so this so-called textbook produced by James Mill attracted a great deal of attention. James Mill என்பவர் எழுதிய பிரிட்டிஷ் ஹிஸ்டரி ஆஃப் பிரிட்டிஷ் இந்தியா என்ற வரலாற்று புத்தகம் யூரோப்பிய மக்களை மட்டும் அல்ல, உலகளாவிய ஒரு தாக்கத்தை ஏற்படுத்தி இருக்கிறது என்பதை தான் நாம் இங்கே குறிப்பிட வேண்டும். So it's very important, therefore, why we need to be different in terms of history writing. So it is in this context I would like to emphasize whether we are really imitating the British historiography or we are going to be different. நாம் யூரோப்பிய வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர்களை நாம் ஒரு முன்னுதாரணமாக எடுத்து நம்ம வரலாற்றை படிக்க போகிறோமா, இல்லை we are going to have our own innovative approach. So it is very important. So there are many questions. Why do we need to study history? I have told you in the beginning itself. ஏன் வரலாற்றை நாம் கற்க வேண்டும், ஏன் வரலாறு படிக்க வேண்டும், வரலாறு படித்ததால் என்ன நன்மை உண்டாக போகிறது? So most of the time we think history deals with the past. As an individual, I am worried about my future, I am worried about my job and other things. Why do we need to worry about the past? But always remember, history is not something to do with the past only. History is a continuous process of interaction between past and present. It is an unending dialogue between between historians and their facts. So it is in this context we need to realize what is the job of a historian. வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர்கள் வரலாற்று மாணவர்களுடைய பங்கு என்ன இந்த சமூகத்தில்? ஏன் வரலாற்றை நாம் படிக்க வேண்டும்? வரலாற்றை படிப்பதனால் நாம் சமுதாயத்திற்கு எந்த வழியில் நாம் ஒரு கான்ட்ரிபியூஷன் செய்ய முடியும்? So I just give you a small brief introduction why history should be read passionately. வரலாறு ஏன் நாம் படிக்க வேண்டும்? சாதாரணமாக படிக்கிறது நான் சொல்லவில்லை. எப்படி முழுமையாக முழு ஈடுபாடோடு கேள்விகளை கேட்டு தகவல்களை திரட்டி லைப்ரரியின் கதவுகளை நாம் தட்டி வரலாறு படிப்போம் என்றால் நிச்சயமாக எந்த ஒரு வரலாற்று மாணவனாலும் வரலாறு எழுத முடியும், வரலாறு படைக்க முடியும். புரியுதுங்களா? This is the point which I am trying to say. So whoever really asks questions, whoever really seeks for sources, new information, new evidence, new data from different repositories, whoever asks for innovative things from various historical sources would definitely be able to provide knowledge to the society. So who we are now understand? Historians are the one who provide knowledge. சமூகத்துக்கு நாலேஜை கொண்டு வரக்கூடியதில் வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர்கள் மிகவும் முக்கிய பங்களிக்கிறார்கள். வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர்கள்னா சாதாரணமாக நினைச்சிடக்கூடாது. நம்ம வரலாற்றை படிக்கிறவங்கன்னா சாதாரணமாக கிடையாது. Those who study history are extraordinary people. Remember always. So I always have a passion for history. So when I was studying history, I always was taught by teachers, most importantly, not necessarily with the textbooks. So that was the culture. So they would dictate from their notebook. We hardly see any textbook when I was doing my studies. So those teachers would dictate from their own notebook. So that notebook they were using for when they were doing their studies. So their BA or MA notes they used to use for their students. So now I'm not talking about that notebook culture any longer. So that notebook culture will never ever prompt you to ask questions. You will remain like a very important not very important historians. So it's in this context I need to tell you two kinds of historians. There are two kinds of historians. So I'm not talking about the British historians. இரண்டு வகையான வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர்களை நாம் காண முடியும். இரண்டு வகையான வரலாற்று மாணவர்களையும் நாம் காண முடியும். So there are two kinds of historians. ரெண்டு வகையான மாணவர்கள். So the first kind of historians or students, they simply imitate, simply reproduce from the textbook or from the notes what they read. So it's almost like copy, paste, and copy, cut, paste. CCP historian. So the first category of historians or students I'm talking about is CCP. So this is the term used by historian R.G. Collingwood in his book Idea of History. So in this book, R.G. Collingwood identifies that those historians who hardly ask questions, who would hardly look for new information, who would hardly knock the doors of libraries and archives, will remain like a CCP. I hope you understand. CCP na enna puriyudilla? Copy, cut, paste. So now most of us are experts in the school and the college times. If a teacher gives assignment and in 24 hours assignment will be ready. How this is possible? So this is not at all possible. If a teacher gives an assignment to a student and student comes and tells, sir, assignment is done in just 24 hours. So this kind of student or this kind of historian that I am talking about, it's CCP. Copy, cut and paste. It doesn't need any intelligence. Idukku edu intelligence தேவையா? No. Only hand. Your hand works and everything becomes clear. Right? So those kind of students, those kind of historians can never make a difference in their profession. Puriyudala? So my humble request, my humble suggestion to the students of history, particularly I just wanted to inform the students of Dr. Kumar and others, those who are viewing it. So from today onwards, you should think that you are no longer interested in CCP historian or history. Right? So because it doesn't need any intelligence, it doesn't need any creativity, it doesn't need any innovation, because you are simply reproducing. You are simply imitating. You are simply copying. So this is one set of historian. They are very dangerous to the society and they cannot give any substantial contribution to the society. And the second group of historians or students I'm talking about is scientific historian. Scientific historian. They would ask questions. I'm seeing in my university also, students would ask series of questions. How does it possible? Explain. What went wrong? What was the sources you have? How do you define this particular event? Why this did not happen in that particular historical setting? What could be the reason? So these kind of questions that we need to ask. I really appreciate those students who would definitely ask these questions. இந்த நிகழ்வு எப்படி நடந்தது, எதற்காக நடந்தது, ஏன் நடந்தது என்பதை நாம் தெளிவாக அந்த கேள்வியை கேட்போம் என்றால், so it's we will never be we will always be able to contribute something to the society, right? So the second set of historians that I am talking about is scientific historian. Scientific historian. Scientific historian, therefore, would always ask questions, seek for new information, and knock the library and archives. இப்போ லைப்ரரின்னு சொன்னாலே எல்லாம் பயந்து போய் நடுங்கிற மாதிரி ஆகி போயிடுச்சு. லைப்ரரியில் போய் படிங்கப்பா அப்படின்னு சொன்னால் அதெல்லாம் பார்த்துக்கலாம் சார், எக்ஸாம் டைமில் பார்த்துக்கலாம் அப்படிங்கிற மாதிரி ஆகிப்போச்சு. ஆனால் எனக்கு தெரிஞ்ச சில பேராசிரியர்கள்லாம் லைப்ரரியிலே புத்தக புழுவாக அப்படி புத்தகத்துக்கூடயே படுத்து தூங்குற அளவுக்கு சில ப்ரொஃபஸர்ஸ்லாம் நான் பார்க்குறேன். அவங்க வரலாற்றுக்கு ஒரு மிகப்பெரிய பங்களிப்பை அளிச்சுக்கிட்டு இருக்காங்க, தமிழ்நாட்டிலையும் சரி, அதர் பார்ட்ஸ் ஆஃப் இந்தியா ஆல்சோ. Those who really love books, those who really like libraries, those who really like or love to go to archives, I definitely can tell you that they are going to make history. They are going to make history. They are not only reading history, they are not only writing history, but they will definitely make history. We have many instances of those historians, right? So now you have to decide what kind of historians you want to be. நீங்கள் தான் இப்போது முடிவு பண்ணணும், நான் எதுவும் சொல்ல முடியாது. I can just simply share my views. Whether நீங்கள் காப்பி கட் பேஸ்ட் ஹிஸ்டாரியனாக இருக்க விரும்புகிறீங்களா, இல்லை scientific historian or academic historian நீங்கள் விரும்புகிறீங்களா அப்படிங்கிறத நீங்கள் தான் முடிவு பண்ணணும், சரிங்களா? So what I'm trying to suggest here is historians have more responsibility in this society than anyone else. வரலாற்று மாணவர்களும் வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர்களும் சமூகத்திற்கு அளிக்கக்கூடிய தொண்டு மற்றவர்களை காட்டிலும் மிக பெரிதான தொண்டு, மிக பெரிதான பங்களிப்பு. ஸோ வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர்கள் வரலாற்றை ஒழுங்காக எழுதவில்லை என்றால் அநேகமாக பிரச்சனைகளையும் நாம் சந்திக்க வேண்டியது இருக்கும். ஸோ ஐ வுட் therefore consider that historians are the sixth pillar of the society. Historians are the fifth pillar of every society. So if historians don't write history properly without bias and prejudice, we will be facing a lot of problems in the society. That is what witnessing. Because history most of the time is written by the powerful. History is written most of the time by the influential section. History most of the time is written by the so-called elite sections. History mostly has been considered as the exclusive property of the powerful, the rulers, ruling class, upper sections of the society. So now, as a student, you have a tremendously rich responsibility than anyone else. So I always consider, therefore, historians have more responsibility than anyone else on earth. Okay, so the most important individual that I would like to emphasize, who writes history? Why do we need to rewrite history? Okay, rewriting nowadays become very controversial. I strongly suggest that we need to rewrite history. Not political history I'm talking about. So the history of my society or your society or anyone's society, if they don't produce their own historians, always remember, you will never be able to get your identity. You will always be treated as a marginal. One important person that I would like to emphasize here is an African American sociologist and revolutionary leader, W.E.B. Du Bois. D-U-B-O-I-S. Those of you can note down, please note down, and you have to explore and you have to ask questions. Because as you're all professional historians, as you're all scientific historians, yes or no? Yes. So scientific historians, you have to ask questions, and the person that I have referred to now is Du Bois. W-E-B. Du Bois. D-U-B-O-I-S. I like this person for a variety of reasons. Because he said, history is written by victors. History is written by victors. Who are these victors? Not necessarily I'm talking in the terms of sports and games. Victors are mostly influential section. Those who are powerful. Those who are oppressing the other sections. And those who are ruling. Most importantly, the British. Those who consider themselves as privileged. So those people who always try to take advantage of the so-called underprivileged or disprivileged sections of the society. Now it is your duty as a student of history to rewrite your own story. Every student of history therefore should write your own history. I'm telling this with all conviction and from the depth of my heart. It's not that history should be written by victors or influential sections or the particular sections of the society. Every student of history, every budding historian, therefore, should take it seriously that you are studying history seriously. So history is therefore a serious business. Don't take it lightly. Because you are a knowledge provider to the society. You are not just simply imitating, or you are not simply providing information to the society as anyone else. You are providing information as a historian. So the information that you provide can change the society. Always remember. Just one thing we need to remember, there's always a proverb. Until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. Meaning, if the powerless, if the ordinary people don't write their stories, don't tell their stories, the powerful get all the credit. So I'm not dividing any powerful and powerless here. Almost you need to remember that every student of history has a responsibility in the society. So if you don't tell your story, if you don't write your story, I think you will remain one of the subjects of those who write your history. புரியுதா? So history படிக்கிறதுனால நீங்க சமுதாயத்திற்கு knowledge கொடுக்குறீங்க. History படிக்கிறதுனால அந்த knowledge மக்களை சிந்திக்கிற வைக்குது. அந்த knowledge மக்களை ஒரு வரலாற்று உணர்வை கொடுக்கிறது. நீங்க கொடுக்கிற knowledge தான் மக்களுக்கு ஒரு உணர்வை கொடுக்கிறது. So that consciousness creates change. So that change leads to look at history from different perspective. So those different perspectives can lead to rewriting history. Those changes. Remember, I'm explaining once again. So as historians, therefore, you have rich responsibility. The responsibility is you have to provide knowledge to the society. That knowledge, therefore, leads to historical consciousness among the people. So that historical consciousness leads to change in the society. That change leads to a different kind of emergence of different perspectives towards history. So those different perspectives towards history will create a new idea to write history differently. So this I call rewriting history. So rewriting history, therefore, is important. So it's very important. I'm not saying this rewriting. It's not my suggestion that we are supposed to rewrite history. I am trying to understand from R.G. Collingwood. R.G. Collingwood, historian, British historian. He said, every new generation must rewrite history in its own way. ஒவ்வொரு ஜெனரேஷன், புதிய ஜெனரேஷன் மக்களும் அவர்களுடைய வரலாற்றை அவர்களே திருப்பி திருப்பி எழுத வேண்டும். So mostly people, the knowledge changes and the perspective changes and the interpretation changes, the politics changes. So since all these things are constantly changing, right? All these things are constantly changing. We also therefore need to rewrite history. This is how R.G. Collingwood makes an appeal to all students and historians. ஒவ்வொரு வரலாற்றாளனும் ஒவ்வொரு வரலாற்று மாணவனும் கேள்விகளை கேட்டுவதோடு நிற்காமல், தகவல்களை திரட்டுவதோடு மட்டும் நிற்காமல், புதிய ஆராய்ச்சிகளை மேற்கொள்வதோடு மட்டும் நிற்காமல், ஒரு சமுதாய மாற்றத்திற்கு வழிவகுக்கக்கூடிய வகையிலே நம்முடைய வரலாற்று ஆராய்ச்சியும் வரலாற்று படிப்பினையும் நமக்கு இருக்க வேண்டும். வரலாறுனா சும்மா ஒரு நோட்டு புக்கை மட்டும் பார்த்து அதை படிச்சுட்டு அப்படியே மனப்பாடம் பண்ணிட்டு அப்படி எழுதுறத நம்ம வரலாறுன்னு சொல்ல முடியாது. இப்போ உள்ள காலத்தில் now the world is full of competition. So people in Delhi are dying to get admission in history. In Calcutta, people are dying to get admission in history. In Kerala, the same case. But I think in Tamil Nadu, the situation is different. In some period, history was declared as unutility, non-utility. வரலாறு படித்து என்ன பண்ண போகிறான் அப்படிங்கிற அளவுக்கு ஒரு இழிவு பார்வை ஆனது தமிழ்நாட்டிலே இருந்ததாக நம்ம வரலாறுகளில் படிக்கிறோம். கே ராஜையன் and others, historian, they clearly mention that in Tamil Nadu, social sciences, particularly history, was seen as non-utility subject, and this is very importantly explained by M.S.S. Pondian and others, historian M.S.S. Pondian and others. So we need to revive that spirit. இப்போதைக்கு நம்ம என்ன பண்ணணும் அப்படின்னா, வரலாற்றை நன்கு படிக்க வேண்டும், கேள்விகளை கேட்டு வரலாற்றை படிக்க வேண்டும், தகவல்களை திரட்டி வரலாற்றை படிக்க வேண்டும். லைப்ரரிக்கும் புத்தக நிலையத்துக்கும் ஆர்கியாலஜின்னா நம்ம பழைய ரெக்கார்ட்ஸ் அதெல்லாம் வந்து அதில் ப்ரிசர்வ் பண்ணி வச்சுருப்பாங்க. லைப்ரரி வந்து யூ ஃபைண்ட் ஒன்லி செகண்டரி லிட்ரேச்சர். ஆர்கியாலஜி என்பது பிரைமரி ரெக்கார்ட்ஸ். த பொலிட்டிக்கல் டிபார்ட்மெண்ட், மிலிட்ரி டிபார்ட்மெண்ட் ஆர் எஜுகேஷன் டிபார்ட்மெண்ட் ஒவ்வொரு ஃபைலாக பழைய காலத்தில் அல்ல பிஃபோர் இண்டிபெண்டன்ட் பீரியட் அல்ல ரீசெண்ட் பாஸ்ட் அந்த பிரைமரி ரெக்கார்ட். ஸோ பிரைமரி சோர்ஸஸ்லாம் வந்து ஆர்கியாலஜியில் தான் இருக்கும், ஆர்கைவ்ஸில் தான் இருக்கும். Archives therefore are very important for historians to understand. So now the question is, we should not stop history merely studying from a notebook. நோட்புக்கில் இருந்து வரலாற்றை படிக்கிற காலங்கள்லாம் இப்போ மாறிடுச்சு. இனி வந்து we should really go to library, we should go to archives, we have to conduct interviews. We have to conduct interviews with the people, oral interviews. Now we have oral history also. Oral history is also developing. So now what I'm trying to say is, historians have rich responsibility in this society than anyone else, more than anyone else. So now, as I told you, what you can do, வரலாற்று மாணவர்களாக நீங்கள் என்ன செய்ய முடியும்? நிறையா அந்த ஆரம்பத்திலே சொல்லிட்ட வரலாறு படிக்கிறதுனால என்ன மாதிரியான ரெஸ்பான்சிபிலிட்டி சமுதாயத்திற்கும் வரலாற்று மாணவர்களுக்கும் இடையான உறவை நம்ம விளக்கி பார்த்தோம். வரலாற்று மாணவர்களுக்கும் நாலேஜ், அறிவு சார்ந்த தொடர்பு எந்த வகையான தொடர்புங்கிறத நம்ம பார்த்தோம். வரலாற்றை நாம் ஏன் எழுத வேண்டும், ஏன் படிக்க வேண்டும் என்கிறதை நம்ம பார்த்தோம். எத்தனை வகையான வரலாற்று மாணவர்கள், வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர்கள் இருக்கிறார்கள், 2 வகையான மாணவர்களையும் நம்ம பார்த்தோம். இப்போ வாட் யூ கேன் டூ, யூ மைட் சே, எல்லாரையும் பற்றி எல்லா புக்கும் வந்துருச்சே, நம்ம என்ன பண்ணி புதுசாக நம்ம என்ன கான்ட்ரிபியூட் பண்ண போகிறோம்? Whether history will really make sense. Whether history will really make sense. So, the point which I am trying to emphasize is, there are many areas which you have not explored so far. So, there are very hardly few historical works about tribals. Tribals பற்றி நிறைய works இன்னும் வெளியில் வரல. Dalits history பற்றி இன்னும் நிறைய work வெளியில் வரல. விவசாயிகளுடைய போராட்டத்தை பற்றி நிறைய ஒர்க் இன்னும் வெளியில் வரல. ஸ்கில்டு லேபரர்ஸ் பற்றி நிறைய ஒர்க் இன்னும் வெளியில் வரல. அன்ஸ்கில்டு லேபரர்ஸ் பற்றி இன்னும் நிறைய ஒர்க் வரல. So who will do these works? It is you, historians. It is you, historians. It is we, historians. So therefore, the farmers' history should be done by farmers' historians. They know the pain of a farmer. Only a farmer can understand the pain of his profession. Only an artisan can understand the pain of his profession and the movements. Only a tribal can understand the pain of his movement or identity. So if a history of a tribal is written by a non-tribal, there may be possibility for misinterpretation. If the history of a Dalit is written by a non-Dalit, there is also possibility for cultural conflicts. If a history of one religious group is written by another religion, there is also again possibility for bias and prejudice. I'm not advocating that same religious group should be writing the same religion. I'm not saying that. But there are many areas which need to be explored. So far, in the independent, சுதந்திர இந்தியாவில் வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர்கள், வரலாற்று ஆராய்ச்சிகள் நாம் எந்தெந்த ஏரியாலாம் நடந்திருக்குதுன்னு பார்த்தா ஒன்லி எலிட் செக்ஷனுடைய ஆராய்ச்சி இருந்திருக்கும். எல்லாம் ஒன்லி some sections of the tribal, some sections of the peasants, some sections of the artisans, some sections of the underprivileged, some sections of the marginals. So who will write this history? Who will write this history? You may be from a farming agricultural background. Now it's your responsibility to read history properly. You may be a son of a marginal group. It's your responsibility to read your history and to make history and to write about it, and finally you have to make history. You may be from a rural background, that you need to understand the pain of the rural people. You need to understand the movements, the identity, the social stratifications in the society, how long they suffered socially, psychologically, economically, politically, what kind of transitions that particular section of the society underwent. Who will write? It's not the Britisher any longer would be. Britishers obviously get funds for their research, you know that. Almost all historical works are funded by British or Americans or other Western countries. So here now you have to really realize, you have to really study, you have to really work hard. I am also basically from an agricultural background. I studied everything in Tamil medium. For the first time I started writing my exam in BA at St. John's College, Palayam Kottai, Tirunelveli. But I failed in English. I have to admit it, because most of you, the students from the Sacred Heart College, Dr. Kumar might be teaching there from the history department. So I don't want to hide anything. So I studied throughout my career till 12th standard pure Tamil medium. And BA, again for the first time I started writing and reading, because as I told you 20 years ago, teachers would used to come with their notebook. Okay, one single notebook, and they used to dictate. We also write without any asking any question. We simply write, okay, Indus Valley Civilization, which year it was excavated, who are the historians, what kind of the salient features. We simply write the facts. We don't ask questions. We don't look for new information. We never visited library. Of course, we used to go out of compulsion. So that culture is now changing. So notebook culture is changing. I don't know about the Tamil Nadu history students, but I am talking from my experience in Delhi. So now there is a change is taking place from notebook to textbook. So textbook therefore is created by scientific historians. So that gives us knowledge. So that knowledge therefore changes the perceptions of the people about their own community, about their own identity, about their own caste, about their own occupation, about their various aspects of changes that took place in the society. So now it's very important, therefore, as we live in the textbook culture, the era of textbook culture, everyone therefore should be alert, active, and awake. So my suggestion to those students who are watching, undergraduate students who are watching, therefore, is to read history, write history, and make history. So reading history is important, making history is very, very important, and that making history is possible largely how do you write. So every individual therefore has a responsibility in your profession. I'm not suggesting rewriting of history for political reasons. I'm not saying that. When I say rewriting of history, every generation has to rewrite their own history. This is how R.G. Collingwood argues, because knowledge changes, identity changes, polity changes, the economy changes, and all aspects of life continue to change. Therefore, history also should be rewritten. Rewriting history, therefore, is everyone's birthright. Rewriting history, therefore, a fundamental right of all those who have a passion for history. So, again, I am showing this wonderful picture. You remember? This is the picture I have showed you in the beginning. Let me recapitulate. We understand if a person who doesn't have knowledge about history, about his or her culture, or about his heritage, will remain like a tree without roots. If you don't have passion for history, if you don't have a passion for your heritage and culture, remember, you will remain like a tree. Of course, you will remain like a tree, but with no roots. What does it mean? What does it mean? A tree without root would be always identified as a dead wood. So, a tree without root would be identified as dead wood, right? A tree without root will have no identity. Sorry, if you have no knowledge about history, about your community, about the identity of different aspects, you will not be able to defend. You will always become victims of WhatsApp messages. WhatsApp messages will simply tell one thing and you will react, and it will lead to violence, or you will be oppressed, or you will be suppressed, or you will be ruled, or you will be under the impression of the rulers. You need to be a tree with root. A tree without root would become victim by oppressors, right? It's in this context. It is in this context. Historians like you. Now you need to know who you are. நான் ஒரு வரலாற்று மாணவன், வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர் என்கிற உணர்வோடு நீங்க இதிலிருந்து கடந்து செல்லணும். That's the only suggestion. You are not an ordinary student of history. You are a historian. Yes? You are a historian. You have to have that consciousness and confidence. Once you have that consciousness and confidence, you will definitely take the next step forward. What should I do? You are a historian. Yes? You are a historian. Second lesson which I want to share with you is you are a scientific historian. You are a scientific historian. You are a scientific historian, not a copy-paste historian. Copy-paste historian does so more harm than good. Copy-paste historian does more harm than good. So, you are therefore a scientific historian, right? And what a scientific historian's job is, scientific historian உடைய வேலை என்ன? நீங்கள் ஒரு வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர், வரலாற்று மாணவர். நீங்கள் ஒரு வேர் ஊன்றப்பட்ட ஒரு மரத்தை போன்ற ஒரு வலுவுள்ள வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர். மூன்றாவது, வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர்களுக்குடைய தனித்தன்மை, you are provider of knowledge. People who look at you should look for information. People who look at you should not say, அரே ஹிஸ்ட்ரி தானே படித்தா அவனுக்கு ஒன்றும் தெரியாதுங்கிற அளவுக்கு நம்ம நடந்துக்க கூடாது. அவங்ககிட்ட கேளு ஹிஸ்ட்ரியை பற்றி, அவனுக்கு எல்லாம் தெரியும், ஓரளவாவது தெரியும் ஹிஸ்ட்ரியை பற்றி அப்படிங்கிற அளவுக்கு we should create consciousness. வரலாறுன்னா சாதாரணமான சப்ஜெக்ட் கிடையாது தம்பி. வரலாறு படித்தவங்க வரலாற்று உருவாக்கியிருக்கிறாங்க, வரலாற்று படைத்திருக்கிறார்கள். வரலாற்று படித்தவர்கள் வரலாற்றை படைத்திருக்கிறார்கள். அதுதான் என்னுடைய கருத்து. வரலாற்றை படிக்காதவர்கள், நான் அதர் ஃபீல்ட்ஸை பற்றி நான் சொல்லலை, வரலாற்றை நன்கு கற்று அறிந்தவர்கள் வரலாறு படைத்து கொண்டிருக்கிறார்கள். அதுதான் முக்கியம். ஸோ நம்ம மூணாவது என்ன பார்த்தோம்? ஹிஸ்டாரியன்ஸ் ப்ரொவைட் knowledge to the society. So providers of knowledge, that knowledge that we give to the society create consciousness. மக்களிடையே ஒரு உணர்வை, அதாவது சண்டை போடுற உணர்வு இல்லை, ஒரு அட்லீஸ்ட் a kind of proud feeling that okay, this is our history. So it gives a kind of consciousness to the society and the people. And the third is that historical consciousness leads to change in the society. ஒரு மாற்றத்தை கொண்டு வரக்கூடிய வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர்கள் நாம் இருக்க வேண்டும். ஒரு மாற்றத்தை கொண்டு வரக்கூடிய ஒரு வரலாற்று மாணவர்களாக நாம் இருக்க வேண்டும். வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர்கள் மாற்றத்தை கொண்டு வரக்கூடிய ஒரு கருவிகள் என்பதை நாம் அடிப்படையாக உணர வேண்டும். So that historical consciousness, as I told you, leads to change. So that change can bring new perspective. Prida? In history writing, in history reading. And this new perspective or perspectives lead to rewriting of history. வரலாற்றை திருப்பி எழுதுவதற்கு அந்த மாற்றம் பெரும் அளவில் உதவி செய்கின்றது. நீங்கள் புரியுதுல? இப்போ இந்த லெக்சரை முடிச்சதுக்கு அப்புறம் நீங்கள் ஒரு உணர்வோடு போகணும். எந்த உணர்வு? வரலாற்று உணர்வு, historical consciousness. Yes, I am a historian. I am a provider of knowledge to the society. I can make change in the society. I write history. I study history. Most importantly, I write history without bias and prejudice. I make history. With that confidence, you have to leave this session. And now, as I begin, I told you three things. Who is a historian? Historians are those who ask questions. கேள்விகளை கேட்பவர்கள். வரலாற்றை படிப்பவர்களோ வரலாற்று ஆசிரியர்களோ கேள்வி கணைகளை தொடுப்பவர்கள். கேள்விக்கு மேலே கேள்வி கேட்டுக்கிட்டே இருக்கணும். புரியுதா? ஸோ என்ன சார் சொல்கிறாரோ அதை அப்படியே நம்பிடக்கூடாது. சார் சொல்கிறது சில டைமில் முரண்பட்ட கருத்துக்களாக இருக்கலாம். சார் கூட நீங்கள் டிஸ்கஸ் பண்ணணும், ஒரு மேடம் கூட நீங்கள் டிஸ்கஸ் பண்ணணும். ஸோ இஃப் யூ டிஸ்கஸ் அண்ட் டிபேட், யூ வில் கெட் மல்டிபிள் ஐடியாஸ். சரியா? அப்போ ஒரு மல்டிபிள் ஐடியாஸ் உங்களுக்கு வரும்போது ஒரு தெளிவு கிடைக்கும், டிஃப்ரெண்ட் பெர்ஸ்பெக்டிவ்ஸ் கிடைக்கும். ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள், ஃப்ரீடம் ஸ்ட்ரகிள் ஆர் இந்தியாஸ் partition or constitution or Indus Valley civilization or modern India, whatever may be the area of subject, you have to ask questions. Second characteristic feature of a student is you have to seek for sources. ஆதாரங்களை திரட்டுவதிலே நீங்கள் ஒரு முக்கியத்துவம் காட்டணும். ஆதாரங்களை திரட்டுவதற்கு ஒரு நோட் புக்கில் யாரும் சொல்லி அதை டிக்டேட் பண்ண நீங்கள் அதை அப்படி நம்பிடக்கூடாது. தட் இஸ் த ஹிஸ்ட்ரி ஆஃப் த பாஸ்ட். ஸோ நோட் புக் கல்ச்சர் இஸ் a history of the past. Remember, now we are in the textbook culture. We have to read from different textbooks. We have to read from different sources. We have to read from different multiple aspects, different interpretations. So we have to give those knowledge to the people. So that knowledge therefore creates historical consciousness. That historical consciousness leads to change in the society. That change again brings new perspectives to history. So those new perspectives therefore help us to rewrite history. Okay? So I think the time is now 7:25. I think I have taken more time. So you can ask questions. புரியுதா? நீங்க கேள்விகளை கேட்கலாம். You can make your comments in the comment box. Comments கூட நீங்க எழுதலாம். If you really like, you can say something about what point you liked the most and why did you like. If you don't like the lecture, also you'd say frankly. Okay, so I can also think about it. But one thing is, remember, historians' job is precious. Historians have more responsibility in the society than anyone else. வரலாற்றை படிக்கிறவர்களும் வரலாற்று மாணவர்களும் சமுதாயத்திற்கு அளிக்கக்கூடிய பங்கு மற்றவர்களை காட்டிலும் மிகவும் பெரியது, மிகவும் அரியது. ஓகே, இப்போ நீங்க சொல்லுங்க, you are historian. What kind of historian? Or scientific historian. What a scientific historian does? He or she asks questions. He or she looks for new sources. She or he knocks the doors of libraries and archives. You know why? Historians provide knowledge to the society. Historians provide knowledge to the society. Okay, so thank you so much for your patient listening. உங்களுடைய நேரத்தையும் காலத்தையும் இந்த 1 மணி நேரத்துக்கும் மேலாக உள்ள வரலாற்று டிஸ்கஷனில் சேர்ந்ததற்காக என் உள்ளத்தின் ஆழத்திலிருந்து நன்றி தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். And I also thank Dr. Kumar for his painstaking arrangement. So Kumar is a brilliant scholar. I know him at JNU. So both of us did PhD from the same department. So he was doing PhD with MSS Pandian and other teacher. I was doing PhD with Professor Sucheta Magajan at the Center for Historical Studies. So we know each other, and he's a very, very hardworking person. So whenever we used to visit libraries, I meet him in Teenmurthy Library most of the time when he was doing research. He's a very rigorous, dedicated, serious, sincere scholar. So thank you, Dr. Kumar, for your wonderful initiative. And if possible, we will keep in touch. We'll give more lectures so that we will be able to make sense out of what we really share. Okay, so I think now you can ask questions. I'll try to go through maybe later. I'll try to answer all of the questions. And please don't lose your confidence. Please don't lose your confidence. Read history, write history, and you will definitely make history because you're a scientific historian, right? Thank you so much. Take care.